All right, we are now looking today at Revelation chapter 9. Before we get there, we want to review a little bit here. We had, remember the breakdown of Revelation. You have the letter to the seven churches, and then the vision of the Lamb of God on the throne, given the scroll with seven seals. And he went through in chapter 6, opening the six of the seven seals, I should say. And the first four, if you remember, were the four horsemen patrolling the earth, causing trouble. The fifth seal, which is really an important one, is where he sees the souls under the altar who were martyred for Christ, crying out, "How long, O Lord?" So that's chapter 6, verse 10. How long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? And that's really what these trumpets and bowls are going to be all about, is answering that prayer and that request. That's chapter 6. The sixth seal, there was the setup of the sky vanishing like a scroll, the mountains and islands fleeing away and no place to hide, and sort of anticipating the day of wrath. But before we got to that day of wrath, before the trumpets blow in chapter 7, if you remember, we had the sealing of the 144,000. And what was that about? What's the significance of the sealing, of putting a seal on these people?
It would prevent them from being tormented in the tribulation.
Yeah, exactly right. It's distinguishing them. And I want to say this, though, they're not protected from tribulation, though. They are protected from what?
The wrath of
From the
God.
wrath of God.
Yeah.
We all have to go, they're in the tribulation, they're in trouble, they're in dealing with persecutions, they're dealing with martyrdom, but they are not dealing with the wrath of God. That's a big distinction in Revelation, is tribulation and wrath. Tribulation simply means the trouble that we get in this world, typically as Christians, for our faith from the world. Wrath is what God brings upon this world as judgment against them.
That is so huge, isn't it? There's 3 verses, 1 in Romans and 2 in 1 Thessalonians, that says that the people of God will never suffer the end time wrath of God.
Yeah,
And
exactly right. And we're going to see that God's wrath is in response to the tribulation that we're seeing. He says, I will pay back double for the trouble that you've been given. And so his wrath is a payback. And that's exactly what we saw in 6, where the martyrs who have suffered and endured this great trouble are crying out. And the Lord says, a little bit longer, and I will avenge your blood. And so that's what we get to. And so in chapter 7, we have that interlude where he preserves and secures his people so that they will not face what's coming with the trumpets. And then we have chapter 8, which we did last time, where now the 7th seal is opened. And when the 7th seal is opened, the trumpets are handed out and the trumpets begin to blow now. So now we go from the 7 seals, and the last seal opens up the 7 trumpets. Last time we did the first 4, and some of the things you noticed, remember about the first 4 trumpets, some of the things that they had in common? If you remember that, let's take a look at them again and then just make some general observations. We're not going to go deep into them, but just some general observations of those first 4 trumpets. So Claudette, would you read that for us? 6 to 12.
Now the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to blow them. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood. And these were thrown upon the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain, burning with fire, was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of the light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night.
All right. So you notice first thing is the focus of the judgments that come. Something is being targeted in each of these trumpets. And what were some of the things that are targeted?
Well, it was only a third of each.
First thing you'll notice, yeah, exactly right. Every passage had that phrase, a third. It was just a third, which means what? What's the significance of it being just a third of the trees?
Well, 2/3 untouched for one thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's really, you see that as these are just the first 4 trumpets. Remember, there's 7 to be blown. And the eagle is going to remind us at the end that you think these are bad, wait for the next 3. But the sense is that there's a mercy in this, that he is, by hitting the trees and the grass first, and just a third of it is a warning. It's a warning shot, and there's assumed that there could be time to repent here. Same thing, it then hits the waters, the seas become blood, and a third of the creatures die, and a third of the ships are destroyed. But there's still 2/3 remaining there. Again, another a great mountain burning with fire, and again, all this fire and scenes of judgment and fire and blood and so forth. And then again with the waters, it gets a little bit more intense, because now we're dealing with waters that you're going to be drinking from that are going to be made bitter. And that's going to be, many people are going to die from this. This is the first mention of people dying in these so far. And then the fourth one is just a third of the moon, stars, and sun being struck so that they don't shine fully. Again, we don't take all these things in a literal way. Everything in Revelation really is heavy symbolism. And when you see the symbolism of it, you see fire and darkness, which are, fire and darkness are 2 signs. What do they always seem to be connected to?
Judgment.
Yeah, judgment, right? Hell described as the everlasting fire in one scene, and in another scene, he describes it, hell, as the outer darkness. These are scenes of judgment, and the focus of the judgment is on the created order of things. The visible created order is where he's seeing things happening here. It's attacking the grass and the trees, which are mentioned in the Genesis creation story on that, was it the 3rd day? The sea and all the sea creatures affected by this on the 5th day. The third of the stars, a great star falling from heaven, and the rivers and the springs of water, as referenced in like the Garden of Eden, bringing life, are now affected by this. And even the heavenly bodies created on the 4th day, which are designed to give light to the earth, are being affected by these things. So that's where we left it off. It was all kind of warning shots here, still affecting its judgment, but it's the first parts of it. And we're going to see one of the points that John is going to make is that through all these judgments, as we get further into them, what does he say? Do the people ever repent?
No.
No, it'll say specifically, implying that like they could repent, like there's time. It's not come over just yet, but they won't repent, really showing the patience of God. So the eagle comes flying, woe, 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 to those who dwell on earth, for these last 3 trumpets. So that's what we're going to take a look at. Trumpet number 5. And this is Revelation chapter 9. And Rob, if you get that first paragraph for us, 1 to 6.
And the fifth angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth, and he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. He opened the shaft of the bottomless pit, and from the shaft rose smoke like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened with the smoke from the shaft. Then from the smoke came locusts on the earth, and they were given power to, like the power of scorpions on the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any green plant or any tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were allowed to torment them for 5 months, but not to kill them. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings someone. And in those days, people will seek death and not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them.
All right. Hey, Bob, good to have you.
Yeah, sorry I'm late. Just got
That's
back from lunch with Evan, so.
All right, no worries.
Hey, Roberto.
All right, so we're Revelation chapter 9. We just started the 5th trumpet now. It's blown. We're going to break it down a little bit here, and it's a pretty intense scene here. And it's otherworldly, and that's the intent of this. His focus is going to shift now, in a sense, to some spiritual scenes here in the heavenly realms. I want to take a look at what's going on. So verse 1, the fifth angel blew his trumpet, and he says, I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth. And he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. So this star is not just a heavenly body that falls to earth, but it's clearly a person who is given something. So the question is, who is this star fallen from heaven to earth? So as we look at any guesses here on who that star fallen from heaven to earth would be?
Would it be an archangel?
It could be, yeah. The star is a reference to the angels were referenced as stars, were they not? So, a star fallen from heaven to earth. Where have we heard this? Fallen from heaven. Let's take a look at a couple passages here. Isaiah 14:12. Okay. Let's see. Can you read that, Raymond?
How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low.
Yeah, this is in reference to the king of Babylon, but like in Ezekiel, where he compares the king of Tyre to the serpent in the garden. How has this passage been traditionally understood? The day star fallen from heaven.
Satan.
That's the
Small.
thing. And to see further clarity to it is in Luke 10:18. You have Jesus, saying this, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. So this scene of a star fallen, that's just not, that's very intentional language. Fallen, a fallen star is really linked to an angel, clearly, but a fallen angel, and one given great power and dominion. And Satan falls like lightning to the earth. So he's given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. Who has the key to the bottomless pit, by the way? You remember?
Well, Christ says he has the keys to life and death.
Yeah, he says, Christ said, I have the keys of death and Hades. That was in Revelation 1:18. I have the keys of Heth and Hades. So Christ has the keys of Heth and Hades, and he gives those keys to whom he wills. And in this passage, we see him giving the key to that pit, to that bottomless pit, to, I think this is the devil. I think this is the Satan, the star fallen from heaven.
I guess I'm a little confused as to why he would be given Satan the key, though.
Yeah, you have to understand is that the evil forces in the world, Satan, the prince of demons, and all these things, they are in rebellion to God, but they are pawns to him as well.
Yeah.
That remember Joseph said of his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Or that Pontius Pilate and Herod conspired against the Lord to have him crucified, but they only did what God had ordained should happen. And so they are in their wickedness, they still are, even though they have evil intent, are doing what God has ordained should be done. I'll give you another example of this in the scriptures. We saw this when we went through 1 Thessalonians, if you remember. Was it 1 Thessalonians or 2nd? I can't remember. The man of lawlessness.
It's 2 Thessalonians,
That's 2 Thessalonians.
chapter 2.
So thank you, Rob. And it says that in verse 9, why don't you read that for us, Bob, here? Just verses 9 to 12 to see the connection of how this works.
The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all the wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore, God sends them strong delusion so that they may believe what is false, in order that they may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness.
So here's the question for you. This lawless one who is coming, that Paul references, who comes and he does all with wicked deception and deceives the people, who is it that is sending him? Is it Satan or is it God who sends him?
I would say Satan is sending him.
Satan is sending him, isn't he? The coming of the lawless one, verse 9, is by the activity of Satan, right? With all powers, he is behind him. He is sending him. Okay, is that the full answer, though?
No, so God's sending the people who are the unbelievers a delusion so that they will believe within themselves what is false. So they'll believe what the lawless one is saying.
Yeah. God
They
sends
give them
them
the blinders.
a strong delusion. So Satan is behind him and sends him with all power and signs and wonders to do this wicked act, because that's what Satan does. He's all about deceiving the people. But unbeknownst to Satan and the lawless one, God is behind it all, who's sending this lawless one to deceive the people because they did not love the truth.
There's that classic Old Testament passage where Satan tells David, thank you, to number the tribes of Israel. And then there's another passage that says it's God that told him to do that. So
yeah,
the picture there is God working by means, in this case, Satan. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you see this all the time where God will use evil people to judge other people. So he did it with Israel when they were in sin and rebellion. He sends the most wicked nation on earth, the Assyrians, to come in and destroy them, and says, they're my axe in my hand, this evil nation. And when the Judah goes south, he sends the Babylonians. It's such a shock that I think it was Hosea, who is one of the prophets, or Habakkuk, or one of them is like, what is going on?
Oh,
that
Habakkuk, yeah.
how could you send these horrible people
Right.
to destroy us? You know,
Yeah.
and so God uses evil powers to accomplish his purposes. So when we have this scene in Revelation 9, God does not restrict himself to the good and faithful. He uses all the tools before him. And Satan is kind of like a vulture in that he is a bird of prey, and they're kind of ugly and hideous creatures that eat the dead bodies, but yet, as awful as they are, they perform a necessary service in devouring the dead. That needs to happen. And so in this case here, the Lord is giving the key, for the moment anyway, to this fallen star from heaven. And I'm convinced this is the devil. And it makes sense because this is all going to be about demons coming forward, these demonic hordes coming out of the bottomless pit. And who is the prince of demons? Who has that authority? Who kind of leads them into battle is the devil himself. So, but let's take a look here. So verse 2, the bottomless pit. That's a good question. What is the bottomless pit? Any thoughts on that?
Is that a picture of hell?
It is not. Hell has not been created just yet. I think if we look at a few passages here, there is a reference to something, doesn't call it the bottomless pit, but something that sounds similar to it in the
Would
gospel.
that be in death and Hades? Hades?
Well, let's take a look at this passage, Luke 8:31. We have these demons here. So let's take a look at this passage. Claudette, would you get that for us? Jesus encounters this demoniac, and in verse 28, and then let's see, here we go. Okay, yeah, 28 to the end of the paragraph, verse 33.
Okay. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many a time it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the desert. Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. And they begged him not to command them. They begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. Now a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned.
It's a strange story. A man possessed by perhaps thousands of demons, for all we know. And they beg Jesus, if you notice, when he encounters them, he's casting them out, and they specifically beg him, do not to command them to depart into the abyss. And the question, what is the abyss? It sounds very similar to that bottomless pit we're talking about here. There's another passage, I think, that brings a little more clarity to it. We touched on this when we went through 2 Peter. I think it's 2 Peter 2, or no, 1 Peter. It should be 1 Peter, I think. Or is it 2? The false teachers, where he talks about the angels. Where are we here?
I think that's 2 Peter, isn't it?
Let's see. Was it 2 Peter? Oh yeah, verse 4 says, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment. But the word hell is not hell, it's actually Tartarus. It's not Gehenna. It's Tartarus, which was considered this prison, this sort of this holding cell for these angels. So that abyss, that bottomless pit, the whole point of why is it described as a bottomless pit? I mean, what's the sort of the significance of a bottomless pit? Kind of a strange picture.
A long way down.
Wait, now, you're not getting out of it. I mean, it's impossible to climb out of it. It also it's ultimate darkness, but they're held there in chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment. So it's not hell, the bottomless pit. It's a place where these fallen angels are held until judgment day. So it's sort of like they're like prisoners of war, kind of awaiting their judgment. So it's a pretty intense scene here.
Mm.
In Revelation 9, this is where all these fallen angels, demonic hordes, demonic spirits are being held, as we will see in a minute. And so for this particular moment, the devil is allowed to open the shaft so that these can come and do a grim task, shall we say. So let's take a look at what that is. So he opens the shaft to the bottomless pit, and from the shaft rose smoke like the smoke of a great furnace. Smoke of a great furnace. That's a phrase that might ring a bell to you. Anyone know where we've heard that term before?
Daniel?
That's a good one. The furnace, their fiery furnace they're thrown into, that was their punishment, their judgment. But that whole phrase, the smoke of a great furnace, is a specific reference to Genesis 19:28. I don't know if you know what story that is. Genesis 19:28. Can you remember that? Smoke of a great furnace. Any takers? Look. 8.
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Sodom and
Yeah.
Gomorrah, right? He said, as Abraham is looking down towards Sodom and Gomorrah from where he is, he sees the land and the smoke of the land up like the smoke of a furnace coming to them. So again, further fire and judgment scenes here. And the sun and the air were darkened with the smoke from the shaft. So I want to get to the description of what's coming out of that bottomless pit. And so the sense is that what we're dealing with these are not earthly creatures. These are spiritual beings, demonic forces that are moving. They're going to move in different ways, but he's now unleashing not just elements of the physical universe against mankind, but he is unleashing elements of the spiritual world against them. And so let's see what they're about. So let's read that one more time. Rob, would you get that verse 3? Let's just do 3 to 5, I guess. Good.
Okay. Here's Liz.
Okay.
Elizabeth, I meant to
Okay.
say. Okay.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Yeah, hi, Michael. Hi, everybody.
Hey, good to
Sorry
have
I'm
you.
late.
Elizabeth,
Okay.
Hi.
All right, so we're in Revelation 9. We're looking now at how the bottomless pit has been opened and are coming forth now from the smoke. What's coming out on the earth here? Get that, Rob?
Yeah, then from the smoke came locusts on the earth, and they were given power like the power of scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any green plant or any tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were allowed to torment them for 5 months, but not to kill them. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings someone.
Okay. All right. So the smoke comes out, and it describes locusts now coming on the earth. Locusts are a fearful thing. Tell me about them. What are they? And especially think about the scriptures, but just in general, when you hear about locusts coming on the earth, what does that mean?
They devour everything.
All vegetation,
Yeah, they devour everything.
everything, man.
You know, I mean, it's a fearful thing. It's not just one great monster coming. It's more fearful than a monster. I prefer Godzilla than a locust. You know, Godzilla will just kind of wreck a path and get on his way. The locusts are just eat everything. They come and they're voracious appetites. And so there's many references why one of the plagues of Moses was the locusts
Mm.
coming. But these are interesting locusts, aren't they? They're not like typical locusts.
Mm-mm.
First of all, what kind of power do they have?
Like the scorpions.
Like scorpions. So these are stinging locusts. Now,
Mhm.
again, what's the significance of the scorpion? If you remember, the power of the scorpion is a very important reference. Luke 10:19. It goes along. It's interesting. Luke 10 is a very interesting passage for us.
Mm.
Because it talks about, Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. That's what we just said. Remember how the star fallen opens up, but then he says, behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions, and from over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. Scorpions are a symbol of the power of the enemy, the power of the devil, for a couple reasons. One is they sting and they kill,
Mm.
but where do they dwell? Where do you find scorpions?
The desert.
In the desert, in the wilderness. Yeah. And in the desert, in the wilderness, that was always considered the domain of the devil. In fact, in the Old Testament, you remember the Day of Atonement? And you have this scene in Leviticus 16, let me find it here, where you have the two goats on the Day of Atonement, right?
Mm.
And they say there are two goats, and Aaron is to cast lots over the two goats. This is verse 8.
Mhm.
And one lot for the Lord, and the other lot for Azazel.
Mhm.
Okay. And Aaron shall sacrifice the goat for the Lord as a sin offering, and the lot for Azazel, the goat that is chosen for Azazel, that one is sent away into the wilderness to Azazel. All right. Well, who is Azazel?
It's the wilderness. It's expiation of sin, where it's just sent out into the hinterlands, never to be seen again.
Yeah.
That's the hope.
Yeah, the
Is that-
Jewish, the
Is
Jewish,
that,
yeah,
I'm sorry, is that where we get the term scapegoat?
the
in our
scapegoat
society?
comes from there.
Uh-huh.
It's understood as a scapegoat, but Azazel is a name. It's not
Uh-huh.
a thing. It's a name. In fact, the ESV correctly just says Azazel. It doesn't change it to scapegoat. It's Azazel. And in Jewish understanding of this is Azazel was sort of the demon dwelling in the wilderness, the evil
Mhm.
spirit. Some think that that's the formal name of the devil himself. The devil is not his name. The devil is his title. But Azazel might be that might, but whatever it is, they understood there is this demonic force dwelling in the wilderness, and they would send all their sins out to him where they where belong. It's really a strange passage here, but that whole wilderness scene and the desert scene, the scorpion is the perfect picture of these demonic forces, because it's a desert creature in the wilderness that stings and kills. Yeah, Raymond. So, Ray, did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm all set.
Okay, you had your hand up. I couldn't tell if you were trying
I'm
to say
sorry.
something. No worries. All right. So, but these locusts are clearly, being released by the star fallen from heaven and having the power of scorpions, which is the power of the evil one, are released now upon the earth. But they are strange locusts because they don't behave like locusts behave, do they?
No.
What's the strange thing about them in verse 4?
They
Well,
don't
they won't-
harm
Not to harm the grass.
or
Yeah,
the green
Or any
plant. or
plant.
any tree.
they don't do what locusts always do, which is harm the grass, the earth, the plants, the trees. They devour the leaves.
Mm,
These locusts do not. They don't touch the grass or the green trees, or any tree, and the green plants. The plants and the vegetation are perfectly fine. What do they target?
Target people that don't have the seal of God on their foreheads.
Yeah. They target the people who do not have the seal of God in their foreheads. So
Now,
there
when,
is, yeah, go ahead.
when was that put on the people? The seal.
The seal was mentioned back in chapter 7.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, back in chapter 7. Remember the 144,000 that were
Oh,
sealed?
that's right. Okay, gotcha.
And that 144,000 is not a precise number. That
Right.
is a representative number of all who belong to Christ, his people. They are set apart. They are not going to be tormented by these spiritual beings here who come and they torment. We're not told exactly how they torment them. It's very symbolic, but they are targeting specifically those who do not have the seal. Now, when have you seen in the Bible God sending a spirit to torment someone who was under judgment? Saul, if you remember that. Remember Saul,
Mm.
right? After the spirit leaves him, God sends a spirit to torment him.
mm,
And only David can relieve it when he plays his music. And it sends Saul into madness. And so there's a sense in which this is what's being described here is not a physical, visual experience, but a spiritual attack on those who don't belong to God. That's the next phase of their judgment. But their torment of them is limited.
mm.
How is it limited first? Verse 5.
We can't kill them.
Not allowed to kill them, right? Oh, they're going to wish they were dead, but you're not allowed to kill them, right?
For 5 months duration.
And it's only 5 months.
5 months. Yeah.
Okay. By the way, that's a strange amount of time, 5 months.
Mm.
And I was looking about 5 months. What is anything in the Bible that lasted for 5 months? I don't know if you know, I can only find one thing that made sense that lasted for 5 months. It was, let's take a look at it here, in Genesis 8, 1-4. And
Ark,
The
the
flood.
ark was on
Yeah.
the water for 5 months.
yes, the fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed, the rain from the heavens was restrained, and the waters receded from the earth continually. At the end of 150 days, that's 5 months,
5 months.
the waters had abated. And the
Mm.
7th month the ark came to rest. So it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. But basically the water didn't begin to recede, I guess, until 155 months into it. Is that correct? Is that how I'm reading that right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Oh.
he sent a raven out and the raven came back. No,
Amen.
the raven didn't come back.
So you
Good.
could say that the 5 months, the 150 days during the flood
Yeah.
was the period of time when God was actively judging
Mm.
and destroying the world. And then after that 5 months period, the waters, there's a turn and the waters abate and we begin to have a restoration now. That's the
Mm.
only 5-month period that I could find that might be referencing here. So, but in any case, it's limited, it's time limited. It's not this is not your final judgment, folks. This is the
No.
appetizer, this is not the main course. This torment that's happening to them. And it is so, it's intense. How intense is it in verse 6?
They want us, they
They
want to
want
die.
death.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll long to die, but death will flee from them. It reminds me of Job, where Satan is allowed to torment Job, but not to kill him.
Right.
And Job only wishes he was dead. He's like, I wish I was never born. At that
Mm.
point, his suffering is so intense. It's very similar to the sufferings of Job here. So, all right. So he's going to now zero in on the locusts and get into a little bit more of a detailed description of them. And again, it's an odd composite as he describes them, but there is heavy symbolism in all of this. And so we want to take a look at what that is. So let's read that passage here. Let's come back up to, we will leave off here. Bob, would you read that for us, 7 to 11?
Okay. The appearance of the locusts were like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were what looked like crowns of gold. Their faces were like human faces, their hair like woman's hair, and their teeth like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the noise of their wings was like the noise of many chariots with horses rushing into battle. They have tails and stings like scorpions, and their power to hurt people for 5 months is in their tails. They have as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek, he is called Apollyon.
Okay. All right. The appearance of the locusts. Now, in this passage, he gives some images of, you'll notice a fair amount of war imagery here. Let's go through it here, where he mentions things that you would expect in dealing with war. So verse 7, we'll start there. As he describes the locusts, first thing he says,
They were like horses prepared for battle.
horses prepared for battle. And he's going to use that term again. Where's that? Verse
9, verse 9.
9. They're horses like chariots with horses rushing into battle. Okay. Furthermore, as he describes their getup, he uses some other imagery too. They had breastplates, and he mentions that twice. So really setting up a scene of almost like an army, really like it's an army coming down, rushing against them. It feels chariots with horses rushing into battle. It kind of reminiscent of the remember after they left Egypt.
Yes.
And they're stuck at the Red Sea.
Yeah.
And Pharaoh just unleashes his chariots and sends his horse rushing into battle to destroy them as quickly as possible. It's kind of turning some of that imagery here. Let's talk about each of those things. So horses prepared for battle, chariots with horses rushing into battle. And then he describes on their heads what looked like crowns of gold. Now, the crown of gold, that word crown, remember, there's two words for crown. There's Stephanos and there's diadem, I think it is. And remember the difference between the two?
I forgot.
The diadem is the crown of the king of authority and dominion. The Stephanos is like a wreath, a victory wreath, a crown given to the one who conquers and who is the champion. This is a Stephanos. These are conquerors. It's similar. It's the same word used in Revelation 6:2, where it speaks about the rider had a bow and a crown was given to him and he came out conquering and to conquer. That was that first seal, if you remember. So it's similar imagery as that. These locusts, these demonic spirits are coming like an army in battle and coming to conquer. Crowns of gold. That's another phrase. Do I have that? So he says some interesting things about us. The next thing is their faces, like human faces. Do you know the significance of that? I mean, if the human faces, as opposed to that of a beast, of an animal. Any thoughts on that?
Would it be, is in reference to a nation that's about to devour?
Yeah, that could be. You know, it was interesting. Some have interpreted this passage that way, that these locusts sort of are coming in the form of an invading army, and the whole thing of not just their human faces, but their hair, like women's hair. If you were thinking in a literal terms of that, who at that time, in John's time when they're writing this, were these armies with human faces and women's hair?
Barbarians?
That's the barbarians. Absolutely. The Romans were very clean cut, you know, but the barbarians over on the other side of the Euphrates River, just outside, the hordes of barbarians ready to overrun at any moment. Some have said that that's sort of what this is a reference to, perhaps. Either way, the idea of the human faces could also be that they're referencing these are intelligent beings. They're not like animals. Their hair like women's hair. There's one reference I could find to long hair, and I don't even know if it fits or not, but in Deuteronomy 32, 41 and 42, God says, if I sharpen my flashing sword and my hand takes hold on judgment, I will take vengeance on my adversaries and will repay those who hate me. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh with the blood of the slain and the captives from the long-haired heads of the enemy. That God bringing vengeance upon his enemies and doing it from the long-haired heads of the enemy. It's maybe that's something, but the women's hair is I think in this context gives a sense of the wildness of these hordes, that the long unruly hair, that they are clearly warriors coming, spiritual warriors, but with that long hair, there's a wildness about them, a ferocity that you see in these barbarians types. The teeth of lions. That's an interesting one here. What just is immediately when you hear that, does that give you some thoughts?
Ferocious.
Well, the barbarians were tough people. They would tear into an animal and eat it. they didn't have the refinery of the rich.
Yeah.
And they were barbaric in their behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is, I mean, it's really interesting. It's like he's describing these locusts coming from the bottomless pit,
Mm.
this demonic horde, but then he presents them that you could clearly interpret it as sort of like coming in the form of these barbarian hordes and armies that you think of Attila the Hun and Genghis Khan and these sorts who are just cruel and barbaric and just, you know, even behaving like animals in one sense. But the lion's teeth is, you're going to see some references in the Psalms that might be helpful. See, Psalm 57:4. He says, my soul is in the midst of lions. I lie down amid fiery beasts, the children of man whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. There's another one too. Where's it? 58:6, where he says, "O God, break the teeth in their mouth, tear out the fangs of the young lions, O Lord." And who are the young lions with the teeth? Well, do you indeed, let's read that whole thing here. Let's see. Elizabeth, would you get that for us?
Sure.
58.
Do you- all the way down, or
Take it down to verse 6. I think that'll be helpful.
do you indeed decree what is right, you gods? Do you judge the children of man uprightly? No, in your hearts you devise wrongs. Your hands deal out violence on earth. The wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray from birth, speaking lies. They have venom like the venom of a serpent, like the deaf adder like that stops its ear, so that it does not hear the voice of charmers or the churning or of the churning enchanter. O God, break the teeth in their mouths, tear out the fangs of the young lions, O Lord.
Okay. Interesting. You mighty lords, you, he describes them as gods, you gods. So when you see in the scriptures a reference to the gods, you're dealing with heavenly beings here in the spiritual realm, and these perhaps what Paul refers to as the rulers, the authorities in the heavenly places, these rebellious ones, but also who are acting through powerful earthly rulers. But he describes the end of how, oh God, break the teeth in their mouth, tear out the fangs of the young lions, oh Lord. You know, why is that? What does that mean? What happens if you were able to tear out the fangs of the young lions? What do you have?
You would
Weak
have kittens or cat.
You have kittens, right? Yeah, they're not gonna, that's their main source of power. I mean, you've got their claws, but it's really their teeth
To tear the flesh, yeah.
that you're afraid of. So you can tear out their teeth, you can really disarm them. And so in Revelation 9, they are coming, and who is it that's described as a lion seeking someone to devour?
Satan.
Yeah,
Satan,
your
yeah,
enemy,
Satan.
right? Your enemy, the devil, comes with like a lion seeking someone to devour. Again, these are evil forces at work. They're doing what God has ordained to be done. He uses them to bring judgment upon those who do not have the seal of God on them. He talks about their breastplates of iron, and iron would have been very well known at that time, because the iron, if you remember, was it's the symbol of the fourth empire, the Roman Empire that they were part of. Remember the legs of iron?
Yeah.
And iron and feet of clay.
Yeah.
All right. Now he talks about their tails, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure what the tails that sting like scorpions and the power to hurt people is in their tails.
Scorpion bites, it's venom is in the tail of a scorpion.
Yeah.
'cause
Yeah.
it flares up its tail and bites.
So they
and
come
kick
with the power is in their tails. And I'm curious if there's any kind of a, I'm just going to do a quick search because I forgot to look this up, but the tails, anybody have a note on that in theirs? If they have any idea of what that, if there's any spiritual significance to the power in their tails, other than just that they're scorpions, I guess. So they're not, they're coming like locusts,
Mhm.
but they really are scorpions.
Mhm.
Because the power of the locust is in their mouth. They just devour everything. But these come in their tails. It could be just a reference to like the linking them also with the serpents who are Moses grabs the serpent by the tail, and I'm not sure. But anybody have a note on that one? Verse 10? Nothing. Okay. All right, but they do have a king. They are not they are not without a leader, and the king over them is the angel of the bottomless pit.
Mhm.
I think that's the same king as up here, right?
Mhm.
The star fallen from heaven, who was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. And we have a name for this angel, and his name in Hebrew is
Abadan.
Evident.
Abaddon, and in Greek it's Apollyon. Now, do you know why he does that? Why he gives the Hebrew name and the Greek name?
I imagine because he's writing to people who come out of Judaism and Gentiles.
Yeah, they had, remember, they have two versions of the Old Testament that they had at that time.
Right.
There's the Hebrew version, and then there's the Septuagint, the Greek translation of it. And some of the Jews who were Christians in the synagogues would have been, many of them would have been familiar with the Hebrew version, but most people would have been familiar with the Greek version.
Mhm.
And he says in Hebrew, it's Abaddon. And the Greek, he is called Apollyon. In fact, there is reference in the Old Testament to Abaddon. And you can see quite a few places where he's referenced. So we have here, if you just look at some of these phrases here, we'll look at a couple of them. I think the main one I want to look at is probably Psalm 88, 10 to 12. And Raymond, would you be able to read that for us here, 10 to 12?
Do you work wonders for the dead? Do the departed rise up to praise you? Is your steadfast love declared in the grave, or your faithfulness in Abaddon? Are you wonders known in the darkness, or your righteousness in the land of forgetfulness?
Yeah. So this is an interesting phrase because in Hebrew, you have in their poetry this parallelism where they just repeat the same thought in a different way. And so he's asking this question like 6 different ways, but it's really asking the same question. Do you work wonders for whom?
For the dead.
It
For the
did.
dead. All right. Do the departed rise up to praise you? So you have God's wonders he's saying, of course, the answer is no. You don't work wonders for the dead. The departed don't rise up to praise you. These are rhetorical questions. Is your steadfast love declared where?
In the grave.
In the grave. Is your faithfulness declared in Abaddon? Are your wonders known in the darkness? And your righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? So all these things I've highlighted here, they are all referencing roughly the same idea. And so when you see Abaddon, what is Abaddon? Well, can you figure it out from the other parts?
Well, he would be from the bottomless pit.
Sounds like the bottomless pit, doesn't it? And it sounds like the grave, the dead, the departed, the land of forgetfulness, the abyss. Basically, where God's love and faithfulness and his wonders and his joy is never known. But Abaddon and Apollyon, I think Abaddon means destruction, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm.
And Apollyon is the Greek word, and it means so it says here Abaddon means destruction, and Apollyon means destroyer.
The great character in Pilgrim's Progress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this king over their king, the angel of the bottom place, is the destroyer. So and that is the devil himself. He is the murderer. He is the thief, comes to steal, kill, and destroy.
Mm.
The Lord is using the destroyer. He will judge the destroyer, but at this point, he's using him to render his wrath, beginning his wrath against the those who do not have the seal of God upon them.
Mm.
So the devil first brings God's judgment against his own people. So the devil's own people, I should say. All right, we'll break it there, I think. Any last thoughts on that? Well, that's the first woe. We got 2 more to come.
Mm.
There's a lot more happening, but any last thoughts, comments before we break?
At the end of chapter 8, verse 13, where it says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," made me think of holy, holy, holy. You know,
Yeah,
Mm.
holy, holy, holy. You know, they would say it twice to emphasize. So to emphasize the
Yeah.
holiness of God, they say 3 times, holy, holy, holy.
yeah,
And the what's coming here, they don't just say whoa, whoa.
yeah. You know, that's a great observation. And you start comparing some of the descriptions, like the description of the locusts, and some of the similar themes, but in different ways to
Mm.
describe Christ. Like the sound of the locust wings was like chariots of horses rushing into battle. When we heard the Lord speak, it was the sound of rushing waters. It was just such a different way. It's a
Mm.
fearful, horrifying scene. Whereas you compare that to when the Lord appears to John in Revelation 1, and the glorious way that he is described with such wonder and awe and holiness, compared to this terrifying scene. It's there's going to be a lot of that compare and contrast going on in Revelation 2. So, all right, great.
Mm.
And when I first saw that term breastplate in this passage, I didn't see it. My first thought was, I wonder if this somehow related to, Ephesians 6 or the breastplate
Yeah.
of righteousness. I didn't see it, so I kind of nixed that idea. But I started searching to see if there was a parallel.
Yeah, but it kind of it does have a similar purpose. It is for battle. It is for battle. So, all right, we're going to stop recording here.